Okay, guys, tonight's lesson is comparing and ordering fractions, and this is topic 9-5. And I want you to put your seatbelts on tonight because I'm going to show you several different things that I think will be helpful as you compare fractions and order fractions. If you just look at this little chart that I've put on this slide, it shows a number line, and it shows how you can use a number line if you're comparing fractions, but a number line or fraction bars aren't always feasible. Sometimes you just have to know which fraction is greater than another fraction or less than another fraction. So I'm going to be working with several different things tonight to show you how the easiest way would be, and I'm going to kind of leave it up to you as to how you choose to compare and order fractions and mixed numbers. So if we start with this first slide, how can you compare fractions? Shauna and Tom walked two different paths in Trout Park. Shauna walked 5/6 of a mile, and Tom walked 3/4 of a mile. Which is greater, 5/6 or 3/4? So this problem, if you were to see this problem on a test or on a worksheet, it would probably be set up like this. And you are to tell greater than, less than, or equal to. Now, I want to show you a really quick way. I'm sure in 4th grade you learned how to find common denominators, and that is a fantastic way to order fractions. But I want to show you another just really quick way that's called cross multiplying. So basically what you're going to do is come over here to this denominator and cross over and multiply it times this numerator. So 4 times 5 is 20. Okay, so I'm making this new numerator 20. I'm going to do the same thing on this side. Cross over and do 6 times 3 is 18. And that's my new numerator. Now I know that 20 is greater than 18, so a greater than sign will go in there. Now, no, we haven't found common denominators there. However, basically what we have done is I've taken 4 and multiplied it by the numerator here, which is what I would have done if I needed to find a common denominator here. Over here, I've taken 6 and multiplied it, which would have given me the 18, and I would have had a common denominator over here. This is just a quick step when you have proper fractions to very quickly compare them. If you cross multiply, you can use the new numerators that you designed or that you made, and you will get it right every time. Now let me just really quickly show you, had you done common denominators. So we had 5/6 and we had 3/4. So a common denominator for 6 and 4 would be 12. So let's make them both 12ths. And if you remember from 4th grade, the way you find common denominators is you have to say, how did I get from 6 to 12? And that was times 2. Which means, to be fair, you have to do the same thing to the numerator, okay? So this would turn into 10 twelfths. 10 twelfths is equivalent to 5/6. How did I get from 4 to 12 in my denominators? Well, I multiplied times 3, which means I have to multiply times 3 for my numerator because you have to be fair. 3 times 3 is 9. So now we have 10 twelfths and 9 twelfths, and we know that 10 twelfths is greater than 9 twelfths. It still gave you the right answer, but this is another way to do it. So you can cross multiply, or you can find a common denominator when you have two proper fractions. Now by proper, I mean, we learned yesterday that improper fractions are fractions where the numerator is larger than the denominator. Okay, these are proper. These are not that way. Now, when we throw mixed numbers into the picture, it starts to become a little clouded. So I want us to look at these 4 numbers here. Some of them are mixed numbers, some of them are proper fractions. What is one thing that we know when we look at these numbers? Now let's go back up and read the question. Write these numbers in order from greatest to least. So that's the first thing I would do, is underline that and remind myself that I'm looking for the biggest number first. Okay, so I'm going to rewrite these numbers just so I kind of have them right here clear for me. 2 and 5 twelfths, 11 twelfths, 3 and 1/6, and 2 and 1/3. Now, when you have mixed numbers, always look at your whole number first. It is very obvious to me that this number is going to be my largest number because it's the largest whole number. So I can go ahead and write that down, and I can be finished with this one. So now I've only got 3 numbers left that I need to compare. Okay? Now, as far as greatest to least, I can look at these 3 numbers that are left and know that these 2 have whole numbers. This one doesn't have a whole number. This one's not even 1. It's very close, but it's not even 1. So I'm going to go ahead and put that at the end of my line because I know that is my smallest fraction up here. Now basically all I have left to do is decide which of these is largest, and I'll put it next, and then obviously the other one will go next. Now, they both have 2 as whole numbers, so let's just forget about the whole numbers right now, and let's go down here and look at 5/12 and 1/3. Okay? We can cross multiply here, and 3 times 5 is 15. 12 times 1 is 12. Okay? This tells me that 5/12 is larger than 1/3. So now I can come up here and say 2 and 5/12 is the next largest, and then 2 and 1/3 would be the next largest. And we still have 11/12. I'm going to get rid of this so it doesn't kind of confuse us. 11/12 is our smallest number because it's not even a whole. So from greatest to least, we have 3 and 1/6, 2 and 5/12, 2 and 1/3, and 11/12. Now let's go back and look at these 2 numbers that we worked with by themselves. We said both whole numbers were 2, so we know they both have the same whole number. So we basically had to look at just the fractional part. So we had 5/12 and 1/3. I want to show you the common denominator as well. 3 goes into 12, so I'm going to leave 12. Anytime you can leave your denominator the same on one side, that's awesome. Okay, so I've got to change this one to 12s. 3 times 4 is how I got a 12 here, which means I have to multiply my 1 times 4 to get my numerator. So 1/3 is equivalent to 4/12. I still see that 5/12 is greater than 4/12 and was able to double check and make sure that I have these in order from greatest to least. Okay, so a couple different ways you can do this. A lot of times with fractions you want to use common sense. Go with what you know. You know that this 3 whole number is larger than any other whole number up here. Excuse me. You also know that 11/12 doesn't have a whole number, so it's going to be the smallest number that you see here. Okay? Now, let's look at this first problem up here where we're comparing. I notice right off the bat, excuse me, that my denominators are both the same. When the denominators are both the same, it's very simple. All you have to do is compare the numerators. 3 is less than 4. And I'm finished. There's no converting or anything that I have to do with that problem. Now, let's look over here at 1/4 and 2/3. Now, because the denominators are different, we have one of 2 choices. We can cross multiply if we want to do it quickly, or we can come up with a common denominator. I'm going to choose on this one to cross multiply. 3 times 1 is 3. So my new numerator is 3. 4 times 2 is 8. I know that 3 is less than 8, so that tells me 1/4 is less than 2/3. Now, let's go down here and do it again and make sure we're right. We had 1/4, 2/3. If I were to find a common denominator, 4 and 3 both go into 12. So let's make 12 our denominators. 4 goes into 12 3 times, so that was times 3, which means I have to do the numerator times 3. So 1/4 is the same thing as 3/12. Over here, 3 goes into 12 4 times, so I did times 4. And then 2 times 4 is 8, so we have 8/12. So we're comparing 3/12 and 8/12, and we know that 3/12 is less than 8/12. Okay? Now, down here we have 3 proper fractions. You cannot cross multiply when you have 3 fractions. So that's not even an option on this problem. On this problem, you can either use common sense and just kind of know in your head where each of these fractions would be on a number line, or think of a model and what that would look like. Figure out which would be the greatest and the least. Or we can do common denominators. But what we need to do is come up with a common denominator for all 3 numbers, which sometimes is a little tough to do. I'm going to try 60, because I think all 3 of these numbers go into 60. Let's see what happens with 60. And a lot of times, if you don't know, just multiply them all together. All right, 3 goes into 60 20 times, so that means I have to do 2 times 20, that's 40. 4 goes into 60 15 times, so 1 times 15 is 15. And then 10 goes into 66 times, 9 times 6 is 54. Okay, now always go back and use your original numbers. So if I were to order these from least to greatest, 1/4 would be first, 2/3 would be second, and 9/10 would be third. And I'm very limited in my space. I would want you to write those out for me. 1/4, let me just show you here what I'd like you to do. 1/4, then 2/3, then 9/10. And that's how you would write them in order from least to greatest. Okay, let's look at this next problem that has 3 mixed numbers. We're going least to greatest. Look at this and tell me what you know automatically. I think you know that this one has a whole number 2. So we know this one's going to be our last number as we're going least to greatest. So our job now is to figure out, they both have 1s as whole numbers, so we're now basically just going to compare 2/3 and 9/10. I'm going to come up here and do that. So I've got 2/3, and I'm trying to figure out how it fits with 9/10. All right, go ahead and cross multiply. 2 times 10 is 20. 3 times 9 is 27. Okay, that just told me that the 2/3 is less than the 9/10. So if I'm starting with the smallest number, this one is my smallest, 1 2/3. Next would be 1 9/10. And then last obviously would be 2 1/4. Okay, so there are a lot of different ways. If I had just come up with a common denominator here, let's do it that way as well. We had 2/3 and we had 9/10. Now remembering that the actual number is 1 2/3 and 1 9/10, but just for our figuring out purposes, we're kind of pulling away that 1 and just looking at the fractional part. My common denominator would be 30. I know 3 and 10 both go into 30. How did I get from 3 to 30 in this denominator? I multiplied it by 10, which means I have to multiply the numerator by 10. So that would be 20 30ths. How did I get from 10 to 30 over here? I multiplied by 3, which means I have to come up here and multiply by 3. 9 times 3 is 27. Do you see I came up with the same answer? It's really cool. So I know that I'm correct in saying that 1 2/3 is less than 1 9/10. Okay? I know this is a lot, but let's just kind of, I think the more we practice, the better we're going to get at this. 1 7/8 and 1 2/3. Here again, we have the one whole number, so we can just basically look at that 7/8 and that 2/3. Cross multiply. 3 times 7 is 21. 8 times 2 is 16. That tells me that 21 is greater than 16, so I know that 1 7/8 is greater than 1 2/3. Now I want to show you another way. We've just learned about changing mixed numbers into improper fractions. Let me show you another way this could work. Let's say you forget how to do this cross multiplying, or you get confused and you're not sure what to do. You can always change your mixed numbers into improper fractions. So remember how we do that? Make it math. 8 times 1 is 8 plus 7 is 15. And my denominator is 8 because that doesn't change. Over here, 3 times 1 is 3 plus 2 is 5. Denominator doesn't change. Here you can either cross multiply or you can come up with a common denominator. 3 times 15 is 45. 8 times 5 is 40. We know 45 is greater than 40, so we know that 1 7/8 is greater than 1 2/3. If we had taken 15/8 and 5/3 and come up with common denominators, I would have chosen 24. I know 8 and 3 both go into 24. How did I get from 8 to 24? I multiplied times 3, which means I have to multiply times 3 up here. 15 times 3 is 45. How did I get from 3 to 24 in this denominator? Well, I had to multiply it by 8, which means up here I have to multiply by 8. And 8 times 5 is 40. You see we ended up with the same numbers. I've just shown you a shortcut. Okay? Now, let's look at this last problem here. I have 4 mixed numbers, and before you panic, I want you to take a look at those mixed numbers. I didn't tell you what we're going to do here, but here we're going to do least to greatest. So I can look here immediately and see that I have this one number, 1 7/8, that only has 1 in the whole number spot. So I know that's going to be first. Now I've got to look at my other 3 numbers. They're all 2's, so I'm just going to pull out the fractions, 1/2, 3/4, and 3/5. And I'm going to change them all to a common denominator. So take a look at this and figure out what would all these numbers go into. And I'm thinking immediately of 20. And if you're having a hard time figuring out what your common denominators are, multiply a couple of the numbers together. I multiplied 5 times 4 and got 20, and then I asked myself, does 2 go into 20 as well? And it does, so that one works. Okay? How did I get from 2 to 20? I multiplied times 10, which means up here I have to multiply times 10. 1 times 10 is 10. Down here, how did I get from 4 to 20? Multiplied times 5, which means up here I have to multiply times 5. 3 times 5 is 15. Here, how did I get from 5 to 20? I multiplied times 4, which means I have to multiply times 4 up here. 3 times 4 is 12. Now, I can look back at my numbers. 2 1/2, 2 3/4, 2 3/5. Which of these is the smallest? It's 10/20, which was the 2 1/2 number. So that goes next. Get rid of that one. Of these two, the 3/5 number is the smallest. So remember that was 2 3/5. That would be next. And then my last number is the 3/4 number, so it's 2 3/4. I hope you're seeing it's real important that you're organized as you work like this so that you can go back and match up what your numbers actually go with. Real important that you do that. Okay, now on your notes page, I've got 3 different exercises I want you to do. Part 1, tell which is greater, 9/10 or 18/20. So on your paper, in your notes column, I should see 9/10 and a little circle and 18/20. And then you're going to show me greater than, less than, or equal to, and you're going to show me how you did that with cross multiplication. Remember, we're crossing over. Part 2, I made 3 mixed numbers that I'd like you to put in order from least to greatest. So start with the smallest, go to the largest. I bet you can tell already what your largest is going to be. And then part 3, I did 4 proper fractions that I'd like for you to put in order from greatest to least. Okay? If this was confusing to you, you probably are going to want to go back and watch again, maybe how to find a common denominator, how to cross multiply. Go back and soak it up again, and tomorrow in class we will do lots of practice with this. Have a good night.